Rosemary Walsh gripped the strap of her worn backpack as she stood before the towering iron gates of Blackwood Estate. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone driveway, and her stomach churned with nervous excitement. After 3 grueling years working night shifts at a diner and weekends at a bookstore, she had finally secured admission to Stanford Medical School. But scholarships only covered tuition, not living expenses. This temporary housekeeping position was her lifeline. The gates swung open automatically, and Rosemary walked toward the mansion that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. 3 stories of pristine white stone, windows that sparkled like diamonds, and gardens so perfectly manicured they seemed painted rather than planted. She took a deep breath and knocked on the carved oak door. The greeting that wasn't. The door flew open before her knuckles could touch wood a second time. A woman stood there, blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, wearing a cream silk blouse that probably cost more than Rosemary's car. Her emerald eyes narrowed into slits of pure disdain. "You're late," the woman announced, her voice sharp as broken glass. Rosemary checked her phone quickly. "Actually, I'm 5 minutes early. The agency said to arrive at 8, and it's only." "You're fired." The words hung in the air between them like a slap. Rosemary blinked, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You're fired. Leave immediately." Cordelia Blackwood crossed her arms, diamonds glittering on her wrists like shackles of ice. This was clearly a mistake. The agency sent someone completely unsuitable. "But I haven't even started yet," Rosemary protested, confusion mixing with rising panic. She needed this job desperately. "I don't understand what I've done wrong." "Your presence here is what's wrong," Cordelia hissed, stepping forward. There was something wild in her eyes now, something that looked almost like fear. "I don't need to explain myself in my own home. Now leave before I call security." The voice of authority. "Cordelia, what on earth is happening?" The deep voice rolled through the entrance hall like distant thunder. Rosemary turned to see a man descending the grand staircase with measured steps. Harrison Blackwood was tall and imposing, with silver hair combed back from a face that time had treated kindly. His navy suit was impeccable, but it was his eyes that caught Rosemary's attention. They were the color of storm clouds, and when they landed on her face, something strange flickered across his features. Recognition? No, that was impossible. They had never met. Harrison stopped on the last step, his hand gripping the banister tightly. His heart hammered in his chest in a way it hadn't for years. Those brown eyes. That slight dimple when she frowned. The way she held her chin up despite obvious nerves. It was like looking at a ghost, at someone he thought he had lost forever. "Who is this?" he asked, though his voice came out rougher than intended. "The temp housekeeper from the agency," Cordelia said quickly, her painted smile not reaching her eyes. "But I was just explaining there's been an error. She's not what we need. I'd like to see her credentials." Harrison extended his hand, not trusting his own judgment but needing to understand the strange pull he felt toward this young woman. Rosemary fumbled with her folder, pulling out her documents with shaking hands. As Harrison took the papers, their fingers brushed briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. Rosemary Walsh, Harrison read aloud, and the surname echoed in his mind like a church bell. Walsh. Catherine Walsh. No, it couldn't be. Not after 24 years. Not now. The complication no one expected. "Dad, Natasha called and she wants to," a young man bounded into the entrance hall, athletic and energetic, before stopping dead in his tracks. Trevor Blackwood had inherited his adoptive father's height but had bright blue eyes that sparkled with perpetual good humor. At 27, he had never met anyone who could stop him mid-sentence. Until now. Rosemary stood there clutching her backpack, her wavy brown hair catching the morning light, and Trevor felt like someone had punched all the air from his lungs. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was something in her eyes, a depth and determination that made him want to know everything about her. "Hi," he said stupidly, unable to form a more coherent thought. "Hello," Rosemary replied, her cheeks flushing pink. She had noticed him too, noticed the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Cordelia watched this exchange with mounting horror. This was worse than she had feared. Much worse. Not only did Harrison seem drawn to this girl, but now Trevor was staring at her like a lovesick puppy. And Trevor was engaged to Natasha Sterling, a union that would merge two of the most powerful families in California. This housekeeping girl could destroy everything. The decision that shifted everything. "Welcome to Blackwood Estate, Miss Walsh," Harrison said firmly, his decision made. There was something about this young woman that he needed to understand, something that pulled at memories he had tried to bury. "You're hired." Cordelia's face went pale beneath her makeup. "Harrison, darling, perhaps we should discuss this privately first." "There's nothing to discuss," Harrison replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Miss Walsh comes with excellent references, and we desperately need extra staff for the charity gala next month. She stays." Trevor grinned widely. "I'll show you around." "That won't be necessary," Cordelia interjected sharply. "I'm sure Miss Walsh can find her way. The head housekeeper will orient her." But Trevor was already moving toward Rosemary. "The kitchen is this way. Fair warning, the coffee machine is temperamental. Took me 3 months to figure it out." As they walked away, Rosemary felt Trevor's presence beside her like warmth from a fire. She shouldn't be feeling this way about someone she'd just met, especially someone who clearly belonged in a different world. But when he smiled at her, something inside her chest loosened, like she could finally breathe properly. Behind them, Harrison stood frozen, staring after the young woman who had just walked into his life and turned everything upside down. He needed answers, needed to know if the impossible was somehow true. Cordelia watched her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message: "We have a problem. Meet me in the garden room in 10 minutes. The recipient, Natasha Sterling, read the message in her downtown penthouse and smiled coldly. Problems, she had learned long ago, could be eliminated if you were ruthless enough. The warning bells. In the mansion's modern kitchen, Trevor demonstrated the coffee machine while Rosemary tried to focus on his instructions rather than the way his hands moved or the sound of his laugh. "So what brings you to housekeeping?" Trevor asked casually. "You seem like someone with bigger plans." "Medical school," Rosemary admitted. "Stanford. I start in the fall, but scholarships don't cover everything. I need to save money for living expenses, textbooks, that sort of thing." Trevor's admiration showed plainly on his face. "A doctor. That's incredible. What made you choose medicine?" Rosemary's expression softened with an old grief. "My mom. She died 5 years ago from cancer. The doctors did everything they could, but by the time she was diagnosed, it was too late. I want to be the kind of doctor who catches things early, who fights for patients who don't have voices." "She would be proud of you," Trevor said gently. "I hope so." Rosemary smiled, but her eyes were sad. "She raised me alone after my father left." "Well, she said he left. I think the truth was more complicated than that." Before Trevor could respond, a woman's voice cut through their conversation like a knife through silk. "How domestic." They both turned to find Natasha Sterling standing in the doorway, arms crossed, her designer dress clinging to her model-thin frame. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and her gray eyes were as warm as a winter storm. "Natasha," Trevor said, guilt flashing across his face. "I didn't know you were coming today." "Clearly." Natasha's smile was poisonous as she crossed to Trevor and kissed him possessively, her eyes never leaving Rosemary's face. "I thought we could finalize the wedding menu. Only 12 weeks until our big day." Rosemary felt something twist painfully in her chest. Of course he was engaged. Men like Trevor Blackwood didn't stay single. They married beautiful socialites and lived perfect lives in perfect mansions. Right, Trevor said, stepping back slightly from Natasha's embrace. Maybe later though? I have a meeting with Dad in 20 minutes. Natasha's eyes narrowed fractionally. Of course. Later. She turned to Rosemary with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rosemary, isn't it? Perhaps you should return to your actual duties. The silver in the dining room needs polishing. Of course, Miss Sterling. Rosemary fled gratefully, but not before catching the apologetic look Trevor sent her way. Once alone, Natasha dropped her sweet facade entirely. We need to talk. Now. And in the garden room, Cordelia poured 2 glasses of wine and prepared to share a secret she had kept buried for 24 years. A secret that, if revealed, would destroy everything. Rosemary's hands trembled as she surveyed the wreckage of her small room in the staff quarters. Someone had been thorough. Her clothes were shredded, hanging from the closet like tattered flags of surrender. Her textbooks, precious medical books she had saved for months to buy, lay in puddles of water, their pages bloated and ruined. But worst of all was her laptop, smashed on the floor, its screen spiderwebbed with cracks. Every note from her pre-med courses had been on that computer. Every application essay. Every research paper. Years of work, destroyed in minutes. She sank to her knees among the ruins and finally allowed herself to cry. Not delicate tears, but great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. This job was supposed to save her future, not destroy it. She couldn't afford to replace any of this. Without that laptop, without those books, how would she prepare for medical school? Rosemary? She hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard footsteps, but suddenly Trevor was there, kneeling beside her, his face twisted with fury and compassion. Who did this? He demanded, looking around at the destruction. I don't know, she choked out through tears. I came back from dinner and everything was just. I can't afford to replace any of this. That laptop had everything on it. All my notes, my applications, my research. Without thinking, Trevor pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, aware that this was inappropriate, that he was engaged, that she was just the housekeeper. But his embrace was warm and solid and safe, and she was so tired of being strong alone. She collapsed against his chest, her tears soaking into his expensive shirt. I've got you, Trevor murmured into her hair. I promise, I've got you. We'll replace everything. I'll get you a new laptop tomorrow, new books, whatever you need. I can't accept that, Rosemary said, pulling back slightly to look at him. You barely know me. I know enough. Trevor's blue eyes were intense. I know you're brilliant and brave and determined. I know someone is trying to hurt you, and I won't let that happen. The photograph that changes everything. Upstairs, Harrison sat alone in his study, surrounded by ghosts. Before him on the desk lay a photograph he hadn't looked at in years, pulled from a locked drawer he had sworn never to open again. Catherine Walsh smiled up at him from the faded image, young and vibrant, her brown eyes sparkling with life. They had met at a medical conference in Portland, a brief, intense affair that had burned bright and fast during the worst period of his life. His first wife had just left him, taking half his fortune and leaving him emotionally bankrupt. Catherine had been light in that darkness. And then, 3 months after their affair ended, she had called. Pregnant. Demanding he acknowledge the child, demanding money, demanding recognition. He had panicked, said terrible things he still regretted. He had demanded proof, a paternity test, before he would acknowledge any responsibility. The test had never happened. 2 weeks later, the police had called. Catherine Walsh and her infant daughter had died in a car accident. Fire so intense that dental records were the only way to identify the bodies. He had grieved, had carried guilt for 24 years. But what if Cordelia had been right in her panic this morning? What if the resemblance wasn't coincidental? Harrison picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. Detective Rourke? It's Harrison Blackwood. I need you to run a private investigation for me. Very discreetly. The Alliance of Vipers. In Cordelia's private sitting room, decorated in shades of cream and gold that matched her aesthetic perfectly, two women sat plotting destruction. He's pulling away from me, Natasha said, swirling wine in her crystal glass. Trevor looked at that housekeeping girl like she hung the moon. The video of them embracing should have embarrassed him, should have made him distance himself. Instead, he's defending her. Harrison is worse, Cordelia replied grimly. He's installing security cameras throughout the house. He's investigating. If he discovers the truth. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. What truth? Natasha leaned forward, sensing a secret. Cordelia hesitated, then decided that she needed Natasha's full cooperation. 24 years ago, Harrison had an affair. The woman, Catherine Walsh, claimed she was pregnant with his child. He refused to acknowledge the baby without proof. Before a paternity test could be arranged, Catherine and the infant supposedly died in a car accident. Supposedly? Natasha's eyes sharpened. The bodies were badly burned. Identification was done through dental records that were later proven to be fraudulent. The dentist who provided them lost his license 2 years later. Cordelia sat down. Rosemary's hands trembled as she surveyed the wreckage of her small room in the staff quarters. Someone had been thorough. Her clothes were shredded, hanging from the closet like tattered flags of surrender. Her textbooks, precious medical books she had saved for months to buy, lay in puddles of water, their pages bloated and ruined. But worst of all was her laptop, smashed on the floor, its screen spiderwebbed with cracks. Every note from her pre-med courses had been on that computer. Every application essay. Every research paper. Years of work, destroyed in minutes. She sank to her knees among the ruins and finally allowed herself to cry. Not delicate tears, but great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. This job was supposed to save her future, not destroy it. She couldn't afford to replace any of this. Without that laptop, without those books, how would she prepare for medical school? Rosemary? She hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard footsteps, but suddenly Trevor was there, kneeling beside her, his face twisted with fury and compassion. Who did this? He demanded, looking around at the destruction. I don't know, she choked out through tears. I came back from dinner and everything was just. I can't afford to replace any of this. That laptop had everything on it. All my notes, my applications, my research. Without thinking, Trevor pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, aware that this was inappropriate, that he was engaged, that she was just the housekeeper. But his embrace was warm and solid and safe, and she was so tired of being strong alone. She collapsed against his chest, her tears soaking into his expensive shirt. I've got you, Trevor murmured into her hair. I promise, I've got you. We'll replace everything. I'll get you a new laptop tomorrow, new books, whatever you need. I can't accept that, Rosemary said, pulling back slightly to look at him. You barely know me. I know enough. Trevor's blue eyes were intense. I know you're brilliant and brave and determined. I know someone is trying to hurt you, and I won't let that happen. The photograph that changes everything. Upstairs, Harrison sat alone in his study, surrounded by ghosts. Before him on the desk lay a photograph he hadn't looked at in years, pulled from a locked drawer he had sworn never to open again. Catherine Walsh smiled up at him from the faded image, young and vibrant, her brown eyes sparkling with life. They had met at a medical conference in Portland, a brief, intense affair that had burned bright and fast during the worst period of his life. His first wife had just left him, taking half his fortune and leaving him emotionally bankrupt. Catherine had been light in that darkness. And then, 3 months after their affair ended, she had called. Pregnant. Demanding he acknowledge the child, demanding money, demanding recognition. He had panicked, said terrible things he still regretted. He had demanded proof, a paternity test, before he would acknowledge any responsibility. The test had never happened. 2 weeks later, the police had called. Catherine Walsh and her infant daughter had died in a car accident. Fire so intense that dental records were the only way to identify the bodies. He had grieved, had carried guilt for 24 years. But what if Cordelia had been right in her panic this morning? What if the resemblance wasn't coincidental? Harrison picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. Detective Rourke? It's Harrison Blackwood. I need you to run a private investigation for me. Very discreetly. The Alliance of Vipers. In Cordelia's private sitting room, decorated in shades of cream and gold that matched her aesthetic perfectly, 2 women sat plotting destruction. He's pulling away from me, Natasha said, swirling wine in her crystal glass. Trevor looked at that housekeeping girl like she hung the moon. The video of them embracing should have embarrassed him, should have made him distance himself. Instead, he's defending her. Harrison is worse, Cordelia replied grimly. He's installing security cameras throughout the house. He's investigating. If he discovers the truth. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. What truth? Natasha leaned forward, sensing a secret. Cordelia hesitated, then decided that she needed Natasha's full cooperation. 24 years ago, Harrison had an affair. The woman, Catherine Walsh, claimed she was pregnant with his child. He refused to acknowledge the baby without proof. Before a paternity test could be arranged, Catherine and the infant supposedly died in a car accident. Supposedly? Natasha's eyes sharpened. The bodies were badly burned. Identification was done through dental records that were later proven to be fraudulent. The dentist who provided them lost his license 2 years later. Cordelia sat down. Her wine glass with deliberate care. What if Catherine faked their deaths? What if she raised that child in secret, and now that child is here, in this house? Natasha's mind raced through the implications. If Rosemary was Harrison's biological daughter, the entire inheritance structure would change. Trevor was adopted, beloved but not blood. A biological heir would have first claim to the Blackwood fortune. Her carefully planned marriage would lose half its financial appeal. Does Rosemary know? Natasha asked. I don't think so. If she did, she would have announced it immediately, demanded her inheritance. But whether she knows or not doesn't matter. Her very existence is a threat to everything we've built. Then we remove her, Natasha said coldly. Before Harrison confirms anything. Before Trevor falls completely in love with her. How? We can't be obvious. If Harrison suspects we're plotting against a potential daughter, he'll never forgive us. A slow smile spread across Natasha's face. We don't need to be obvious. My father sits on Stanford's board of trustees. One anonymous complaint about falsified financial aid applications, maybe some fabricated evidence of academic dishonesty. Her scholarship could vanish before she even starts. Cordelia raised her glass in a toast. To making problems disappear. They clinked glasses, sealing an alliance that would set in motion events neither could fully control. The conversation overhead. Outside the sitting room door, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, Harrison stood frozen. He had come looking for Cordelia to confront her about the destroyed belongings in Rosemary's room. Instead, he had overheard every word of their conspiracy. His hands clenched into fists. Cordelia had known. Had suspected Rosemary might be his daughter and had tried to drive her away. Had schemed to ruin her future. The woman he had been married to for 15 years was a stranger, capable of cruelty he had never imagined. And Trevor. His son was falling in love with someone who might be his half-sister, and neither of them knew the truth. Harrison pulled out his phone again. Rourke? Forget discreet. I need answers immediately. Overnight if possible. And I need a DNA sample acquired legally. Can you arrange that? Already ahead of you, boss, came the detective's gravelly voice. I have contacts at the lab. If you can get me something with her DNA, hair from a brush, used glass, I can rush the results. You'll have it by tonight, Harrison promised. The viral video. By morning, the video had spread through their entire social circle like wildfire. Trevor holding Rosemary in her destroyed room, his arms wrapped around her, her face buried in his chest. The angle made it look far more intimate than it had been. The caption Natasha had crafted was perfectly calculated, my fiancé comforting the help. How charitable. 12 weeks until our wedding. The comments below were vicious. Gold digger. Homewrecker. Social climber. Each word cut deeper than the last. Rosemary saw it during breakfast in the staff dining room. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends asking if it was true, if she was really trying to seduce a billionaire's son. Her face burned with humiliation. She found Trevor in the garden, pacing like a caged animal, his own phone clutched in his hand. I'm sorry, he said immediately when he saw her. Natasha had no right to post that. I've already demanded she take it down. It doesn't matter, Rosemary said quietly. The damage is done. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of scheming seductress. Anyone who knows you wouldn't think that. No one here knows me, Trevor. I'm just the housekeeper who showed up 3 days ago. She crossed her arms, hugging herself. Maybe I should quit. This is too complicated. Don't. Trevor grabbed her hand before she could walk away. Please don't let them win. They want you to leave, want you to feel small and defeated. But you're better than that. Stronger. Why do you care? Rosemary's voice cracked. You don't owe me anything. You're engaged to someone else. I know, Trevor said miserably. And I know this is wrong, but when I'm with you, I feel like myself for the first time in years. Not the perfect heir, not the trophy fiancé, just me. They stood there in the garden, hands linked, the morning sun casting golden light across flowers neither of them noticed. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility and impossibility in equal measure. This can't happen, Rosemary whispered, even as she didn't pull her hand away. I know, Trevor agreed, not letting go. The test results. Detective James Rourke arrived at Harrison's office that evening with a manila envelope that felt heavier than its physical weight. The lab rushed it through, Rourke said, his weathered face serious. I have to say, Harrison, in 30 years of detective work, I've never seen results quite like these. Harrison's hand shook as he took the envelope. Inside was scientific proof that would change everything. Charts and numbers and probability percentages that added up to one inescapable truth. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Rosemary Walsh was his daughter. Harrison sank into his chair, the paper fluttering from his numb fingers. He had a daughter. Had had a daughter for 23 years and never known. Never been there for her first steps, her first words, her graduations and heartbreaks and triumphs. Catherine had robbed him of that, yes, but he had driven her to it with his demands and coldness. There's more, Rourke said gently. I tracked down Catherine's sister, Helen Walsh, in Portland. She confirmed that Catherine did survive the original accident but was severely injured. She went into hiding, afraid you would take the baby. She raised Rosemary alone until she died of cancer 5 years ago. Helen took over as guardian after that. Does Rosemary know about me? Harrison asked hoarsely. No. Catherine never told her. As far as Rosemary knows, her father was some unnamed man who abandoned them. Helen respected Catherine's wishes and kept the secret. Harrison looked at the photograph of Catherine still on his desk, at the young woman smiling with secrets in her eyes. She died thinking I didn't want our daughter. She died knowing her daughter was loved and safe, Rourke corrected. Sometimes that's enough. The confrontation. Harrison found Cordelia in her dressing room, removing her jewelry before bed. She smiled at him in the mirror, the practiced smile of a woman who had perfected deception. "Darling, I was hoping we could discuss the gala menu tomorrow. The caterer needs." "I know," Harrison interrupted. Cordelia's hands stilled on her necklace clasp. "Know what?" "Everything. I know about Catherine. I know that you suspected Rosemary might be my daughter from the moment she walked through our door. I know you tried to drive her away. I know about your plan with Natasha to destroy her scholarship." His voice was ice, each word deliberate. "I know that you're capable of cruelty I never imagined." The mask slipped from Cordelia's face. "She's a threat to this family." "She is this family," Harrison roared. "She's my daughter. My blood. And you tried to ruin her life to protect your own position." "Your position too," Cordelia shot back. "Do you think the board will accept some illegitimate child appearing out of nowhere? Do you think society will just welcome her with open arms? And what about Trevor? He's falling in love with his own half-sister." Harrison felt like he'd been punched. "He doesn't know." "Exactly. And when you tell him, when you tell everyone, it will destroy him. It will destroy all of us." Cordelia's voice turned pleading. "Harrison, I did this for the family. To protect what we've built." "You did this for yourself," Harrison said coldly. "Pack your things, Cordelia. I want you out of this house by morning." "You're divorcing me? Over some girl you've known for 3 days? I'm divorcing you because you showed me who you really are. And I don't like what I see." Rosemary was polishing silver in the formal dining room when Harrison found her. She had barely slept, haunted by dreams of Trevor's eyes and the weight of impossible feelings. She didn't notice Harrison's approach until he cleared his throat gently. "Miss Walsh, could we speak privately in my study?" Something in his tone made her stomach drop. "Am I being fired?" "No," Harrison said quickly, and his eyes were infinitely sad. "But we need to talk about something important. Something about your mother." Rosemary followed him through the mansion's corridors, her mind racing. How did Harrison Blackwood know anything about her mother? In the study, Harrison gestured to a leather chair before his desk. He sat across from her, and she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Rosemary, this is going to be difficult to hear, but I promise I'm telling you the truth." He took a deep breath. 24 years ago, I met a woman named Catherine Walsh at a medical conference in Portland. We had a brief relationship. She told me she was pregnant, but I didn't handle it well. I demanded proof, said terrible things. And then she disappeared. Rosemary's world tilted sideways. "My mother's name was Catherine Walsh." "I know." Harrison pulled out the DNA test results, his hands trembling as he passed them across the desk. "I had a test run. Rosemary, I'm your father." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge between two cliffs. Rosemary stared at the scientific proof in her hands, seeing the numbers but not comprehending them. "No," she whispered. "My father left us. My mother said he didn't want me." "She thought I didn't," Harrison said, his voice breaking. "But I never knew you survived. There was a car accident, a report that said you and Catherine had died. I've spent 24 years believing I had lost you both before I ever had a chance to know you." Tears streamed down Rosemary's face. "She never told me. All those years, she never said your name, never told me anything except that my father didn't want the responsibility. I'm so sorry, Harrison said, and he was crying too now. I'm sorry I wasn't there for your first day of school, for every birthday, for when Catherine got sick. I'm sorry I missed everything. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be. Rosemary looked at this man, this powerful stranger who was somehow her father, and felt something crack open in her chest. All her life she had wondered about the missing piece, the father-shaped hole in her heart. And here he was, imperfect and grieving and real. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Neither do I, Harrison said with a watery laugh. But maybe we can figure it out together? The truth about Trevor. There's something else you need to know, Harrison said gently. Trevor is my adopted son. I adopted him when he was 5, after his biological parents died. He's not your blood relative. Rosemary's heart stuttered. He's not my brother? No. Harrison's expression softened with understanding. I've seen the way you look at each other. And I know Trevor is engaged, I know it's complicated. But I wanted you to know the truth before you made any decisions based on false information. This changes everything, Rosemary breathed. It changes many things, Harrison agreed. But Rosemary, you need to understand that Trevor's engagement isn't just a personal arrangement. It's a business merger that affects hundreds of jobs, multiple companies. If he breaks it off, there will be consequences. I would never ask him to do that, Rosemary said quickly. I'm not here to ruin anyone's life. I know. But Trevor needs to know the truth too. About who you are, about his freedom to choose. Harrison stood. Let me talk to him first. Give me an hour. The breaking point. Trevor was in the mansion's gym, punching a heavy bag with more force than technique, when Harrison found him. Sweat soaked through his shirt, and his knuckles were raw. Want to tell me what the bag did to deserve that? Harrison asked. Trevor stopped mid-punch. I'm engaged to a woman I don't love, I'm falling for someone I can't have, and everyone thinks I'm some kind of playboy taking advantage of the help. Pick your problem. Sit down, son. We need to talk. Something in Harrison's tone made Trevor comply. He grabbed a towel and sat on a nearby bench, looking at his father with trepidation. Rosemary Walsh is my biological daughter, Harrison said without preamble. Trevor's towel dropped from his hands. What? Harrison explained everything, Catherine Walsh, the hidden pregnancy, the faked deaths, the DNA test. Trevor listened in stunned silence, his mind reeling. So she's my sister, he finally said, his voice hollow. No. You're adopted, Trevor. You know this. There's no blood relation between you and Rosemary. Because it's what everyone expects. Because the merger matters. Because I thought it was the responsible thing to do. Trevor ran his hands through his hair. But then Rosemary walked through our door and suddenly I could see how empty my life was. How I've been going through the motions, playing the perfect heir, never asking what I actually want. And what do you want? Her, Trevor said simply. I want to know everything about her. I want to hear her laugh every day. I want to support her dreams of becoming a doctor. I want a life that's real instead of performed. He looked at his father desperately. Is that selfish? It's human, Harrison said gently. Trevor, you're my son in every way that matters. Adopted or not, you're my heir, my family, my pride. And I'm telling you that you have my blessing to choose your own path, even if it means breaking the engagement. The merger can be restructured or cancelled. Companies survive changes in leadership all the time. What they don't survive is leaders who are miserable and resentful. Harrison put a hand on Trevor's shoulder. I spent too many years prioritizing business over happiness. Don't make my mistakes. The confrontation in the ballroom. That evening, Cordelia and Natasha had called an emergency meeting of the extended family and business partners. They thought they were gathering allies to force Rosemary out. Instead, they had assembled an audience for their downfall. The mansion's ballroom glittered with crystal and carefully crafted lies. 50 people in expensive clothes holding expensive drinks, whispering about the scandal. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Cordelia began, standing on the small stage usually reserved for charity auction announcements. "We've gathered you here because there's a situation that requires immediate action. A young woman has infiltrated our household with false pretenses, attempting to seduce Trevor and make claims on the Blackwood fortune." Before she could continue, the ballroom doors opened. Harrison walked in with Rosemary at his side. Trevor followed closely behind. The crowd fell silent. "Actually," Harrison said, his voice carrying across the room, "you're all here because my wife has been spreading lies about my newly discovered daughter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Natasha's face went pale. "Daughter?" someone whispered. Harrison held up the DNA test results. "Rosemary Walsh is my biological daughter from a relationship 24 years ago. Her mother raised her alone, and I only discovered the truth recently. And since I learned about Rosemary, my wife and my son's fiancé have been plotting to destroy her life." "That's not true," Cordelia protested, but her voice wavered. "I have recordings," Harrison said coldly. "Security footage I installed after Rosemary's room was destroyed. Footage that shows Natasha entering the staff quarters with a baseball bat. Audio recordings of you both discussing how to fabricate evidence to destroy Rosemary's scholarship." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Natasha tried to leave, but Trevor stepped in front of the doors. "We're not finished," he said quietly. Rosemary stepped forward, and despite her simple clothes and her complete lack of social pedigree, she commanded the room in a way Natasha never could. There was steel in her spine, fire in her eyes. "I came to this house to work," Rosemary said clearly. "To earn money for medical school. I didn't know Harrison Blackwood was my father. I didn't come here with some scheme to steal an inheritance or seduce anyone. I came here to work hard and build a future." She turned to face Cordelia and Natasha directly. "You tried to break me. You destroyed my belongings, spread vicious rumors, plotted to ruin my education. And why? Because you saw me as a threat to your comfortable lives. Because a young woman working her way through school somehow endangered your mansions and your designer clothes. You're nobody," Natasha hissed. "A scholarship student with delusions." "Maybe," Rosemary agreed. "But I'm nobody who isn't afraid of you anymore. I'm nobody who has worked 3 jobs and earned every opportunity through merit. Can you say the same? Or have you coasted on your father's name and money your entire life?" The crowd was riveted. This was better than any reality show. "Trevor," Natasha turned to her fiancé desperately. Tell her we're getting married, that this is just a distraction." Trevor took a deep breath. "The engagement is over, Natasha. You can't be serious. Our families, the merger, can happen without a marriage neither of us wants," Trevor said firmly. "I'm not marrying you, Natasha. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but I won't spend my life with someone who would hurt innocent people to get what she wants."